incredible, and we are so grateful and so fortunate to have Stephen Mansfield back in the Chippewa Valley with us. Stephen is a best-selling New York Times author, speaker. He's passionate about men being real men. He is a great friend to Leading with Power, and I want you to give him a warm Chippewa Valley welcome, Stephen Mansfield.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. We on? We good? Great, thank you. How you doing? I'm nervous you guys are going to starve to death, man. I've never seen such food. That's wonderful. Good to see you. I'm excited about talking today. You can join me? We can tag team. Come on.
There's no seats available.
I was sitting in one. It's right there. Yeah, really. So I'm excited about talking to you today because I've been here since Monday up in some other cities in this area doing some talks to men. Man, Leading with Power is doing some amazing stuff. And by the way, let's just give it up for them. I can say that because I'm not part of it. They're doing great stuff. Good job, Steve. Really good job. I want to cut right to the chase today. We'll have some time for Q&A later, I understand, and so let me cut right to the chase. I want to talk to you about building your band of brothers. Let me start this way, and let me just say to you guys, forgive me, I'm from north of the Mason-Dixon line. I've got southern cousins who gripe about how fast I talk all the time. They say, you talk fast like a Yankee on drugs. So I'm not on drugs today, but I will talk fast, so just, I know I'm talking faster than most folks up here talk, but still, work with me a little bit. I want you to take a moment, guys, if you can go ahead and do the thing with the lights you were going to do, that'd be great, so the guys can see the screen. I want you to take a look in the faces of some of the men here. I'm going to be bumping into you a bunch, sorry about that. As soon as they get the lights adjusted here, take a look at the faces of these men. I want you to consider the men in history, the men of your men who are your ancestors, men from the past. I'll move around here so I get out of your way kind of selectively. Look at the faces of these people from previous generations and consider their lives and how their lives differ from yours. The fact is that these men, for the most part, grew up in large families. I'm just saying statistically that was true. People had larger families in the past that we have today for the most part. And therefore, men were more likely in that generation to have, is that me? I need to do something? Men were more likely to have, of course, fathers active in the home. They were more likely to have uncles. They were more likely to have grandfathers actually living nearby or in the home. They were more likely to have brothers. So just in their homes, just in their families, they grew up in the company of other men, in the company of older and younger men and mentors and people who would teach them the ways of things. By the way, I'm Native American, and so I put this picture in. We'll talk about some land you owe me later, okay? But that's why that picture's in there. But just consider, and then by the way, after they went beyond their family and beyond what they knew in their immediate family with grandfathers and fathers and uncles and brothers and all of that kind of thing, then they were almost always part of, call it what you will, a village, a tribe, a township. Here in the American West, a township. In Native American context, a tribe, or internationally overseas, they'd have a region, they'd have a fiefdom, they'd have some kind of what you might call extended family or society that they would be part of, based on their trades, based on where they lived, based on the people groups they were part of. But just consider those lives for a few moments. They spent their whole lives in the company of men. They spent their whole lives in the company of older and younger men. They worked among them. They needed them. They needed their skills. They needed think about it, on the frontier, for example. What men would need from other men. They would need their skills. They would need them for the barn raisings. They would need them for the farming. They would need them for the harvest. They would need them for defense against, my ancestors, out here on the West. You know what I'm talking about. That men needed other men, and there was the company of men, and there was a networking of men, and there was a community of men. And some of it was family, and some of it was sort of extended family, and some of it was tribe and village and so on. And this went back all the way through history. All the way through history you had this. These pictures are ranging back into the Middle Ages. You'll see some here in the Roman era, actual accurate pictures and depictions of actual faces of men from the Roman era. And even though it was different from maybe our American West or maybe our more European heritage, still they were experiencing the same kinds of things. They had that same kind of extended life. Well, That's quite different from what we know today. I mean, here we are all the way back looking at a final relief here on the, this is from the Babylonian Era, 3,000 years ago, but men basically grew up among other men. I mean, I realize there were the isolated. I realize there were families who might have only had, for biological reasons or some other reason, one son. But for the most part, men through history lived different lives from men today because they grew up in the company, in the context, in the community of other men. But that's not what's going on today. Today, largely because of economic factors, largely because of social trends, largely because of the way work has gone, and maybe a little bit of what technology has done for us, most men today walk alone. Most men today live their lives, when they get a little older, when they get out of the young years, they tend to live their lives in isolation. And the surveys really confirm that. Surveys show that the average man today, I'm going to be walking among you, don't worry about me, just don't let me step on you. Surveys show that the average man today cannot name a best friend. The average man today in the Western world, and this is worse in America than it is generally in the world as a whole, the average man cannot name a best friend. The average man, these are the two surveys that really capture me, the average man does not know who he would call, now this is in America, who would he call if he was out of town on a business trip and his son or daughter got picked up by the police for whatever, legitimate or not, that's not the point. Who would you call to go get your son out of jail at 3 in the morning? Okay? The average man in America cannot name that person. Who would you trust to handle that ticklish situation, that embarrassing situation, that situation that might involve a loan of money, you know, where you get paid whatever fee to get the young man out of, or the young woman out of jail. The average man says, I don't have anybody like that in my life. Okay? This is the one that even presses it a little bit more in. I'll come back to inspires in a minute. But the average man, surveys show, cannot name who he would call if he was again out of town on a business trip and his wife had some crisis at 3 in the morning at the house. So there's the wife sitting around the house in the nightie, you know, or whatever, you know, and the plumbing's gone bad, or the kid's been picked up on the road, or there's been an accident, or the dog's gone, or something. Who would the average man call, who he trusts? Again, he's out of town on a business trip. Who would he trust to go help his wife in that situation? Who would you really trust morally, ethically? Who would you trust with confidence? Who would you trust with competence? Who would you trust to have access to your house at 3 in the morning? In America, the average man cannot name that guy. He not only doesn't have a best friend, he doesn't have a person he might trust, who knows, with his wife in some state of semi-dress or whatever, okay? But the average man says he does not have anybody who inspires him to be better. He does not have anybody in his life who he trusts to hear counsel from, to correct him, to counsel, to inspire him, to encourage him to his best. He hasn't had that in a lot of years. Now that's what that's the average, national average in the United States, and it's very much the trend in the Western world throughout the world. And what I want to know is, what is this trajectory that we seem to have in our society? And I think we all pretty much know what it was. Most men, especially in the United States, when they were young, friends came naturally. Meaningful buddies came naturally. In elementary school, it's built in. I mean, all you have to do is show up on the playground and you pretty much had, you know, buddies to hang with. In high school, it's easy. You're on the football team, basketball team, baseball team. You work for the yearbook club, or you're part of the chess club, or you're in the band, and you just got buddies built in. It's just natural, okay? It's not really much of a problem. I mean, there are loners and there are sadder stories that some of us might be able to tell. I grew up in the military, moving almost every year for 15 years in my earlier life. So I had those, I can feel that outsider vibe that some of us have. But for the most part, friends are easy. You graduate high school, you go to college, you go to the military, you get into a career right away, and again, pretty much friendships are pretty easy. You got a guy to get a beer with, you know, after you're off the site or whatever the situation is. But then things start to change in the life of the average guy in the West, and meaning in the United States. And usually it happens with marriage. Now, I'm not blaming marriage for it. I'm just saying this is when things begin to change in a man's life. Guy gets married, and he begins to focus on his wife. He gets a house to take care of, starts to have kids, and before long, the friends that he relied upon, the friends that he knew, the buddies that he had in his life, the people who were close to him, start to be distanced a little bit, just by virtue of busyness and focus and obligations and responsibilities. And before long, the guy who was in your wedding, or the guy you knew in college, or the guy you yucked it up with when you went on that hunting trip, now they become what psychologists call rust friends. That relationship's grown rusty. It's gone from being a buddy to a phone call once a year, or a yuck it up remembrance session where you sit, having a steak and say, hey, remember 20 years ago when we did so-and-so. But the friendships have become rusty. And so often what happens is that a guy who is moving into his late 20s, maybe 30s, maybe, and of course from that point on, this guy, and this is many of us, does not have anybody close in his life. Does not have anybody who's helping him become a better man. He's not just maybe lonely just from the standpoint of not having friends. That's one level of concern. But the other concern is that he doesn't have guys who are coaching him, who are advising him, who are speaking into his life, who are encouraging him to be his best. We guys, we do that naturally. You put 5 guys on 2 different teams on a basketball court who have never met each other before. What do? They immediately start coaching each other. Throw the ball, man. Dribble left. Do this. Look down court. Guys open underneath. Take the shot. They don't even know his name, but they're telling him what to do, right? Back when you were in school, you had guys who said, what the heck are you wearing? Why are you such a klutz with the chicks, man? What is wrong with you? What language did you rake in when you were talking to Sue? I mean, you know what I'm talking about. Guys will just draw blood. They'll just tell you, get it together, man. What's wrong with you? And good stuff about your life, like, man, if you don't study, you are going to fail. That's the deal. You got to study to get your grades. And maybe you'd never studied before, but two of your college roommates said, man, get to it. And things change. We just naturally coach and correct each other. We need that in our lives. But the average man, most men, do not have that immediate group of people. That's the trajectory of the average guy in the West. So what's the solution? What's the solution? Well, if you are a wise man, then you know that every important lesson of life is found somewhere in some episode of the Andy Griffith Show. Can you just sound off with me? So let's see if Barney has some wisdom for us here. Gotta love those shows. Well, what's my point in showing this? There's a tendency today for people to say, hey, we got a social problem. We need somebody to write a book. We need somebody to give a speech. We need a program. We need a video series. We need a PBS special. We need a government program. And I'm not, all of that has its place. Remember what I do. I work with governments. I write. I speak. I believe in all of those in some form. But I got to say that ultimately, we cannot be waiting for Superman on this issue. We cannot be waiting for somebody to fly in and fix this thing. You got to look around this room, and we got to say to each other, we are the police. I don't mean that in some, military way, like we're taking over the job of the police in this community. I mean, when it comes to this problem of men being isolated and alone and not having a band of brothers, we got to realize it's for us to solve. We got to fix this thing. We got to fix this thing. And let me just say quickly, even though that's not my topic today, that one of the reasons we got to fix this is that when we don't have a culture of noble manhood, of great manhood as I like to call it, of righteous manhood, that we don't have a culture of masculinity into which to initiate the young men. And young men in America today are in absolute free fall. There's an African proverb that says, if we do not initiate the boys, they will burn the village down. I want to tell you that's what's going on in the street gangs in our inner cities. That's what's going on in ISIS. ISIS isn't a bunch of committed, radical, extremist Muslims. ISIS is a bunch of street thugs who got captured by the idea they could have sex with their captives and take money and shoot things and kill people. I know some of them. I work extensively in the Middle East, as maybe you know. And I'm telling you, ISIS is a bunch of unfathered, untethered, unethical, street thugs. They'd be in street gangs in the States if they were in our cities. And so those people are invading our society, so to speak. They are the untethered, uninitiated boys. And so the fact that we don't have a band of brothers, we don't have a noble culture of manhood throughout our society, means the boys are in free fall. And I could talk about that by the hour. Boys are declining by almost every measurable statistic in our society. They're in the worst shape in this generation than in any generation in American history. Whether you're talking about test scores, you're talking about health, you're talking about whatever it is, they're in the worst shape they've ever been in. In fact, I'll tell you one thing real quickly, just to stick it in your brain. I've got some MDs, some medical doctors who work with me in what we do with men. And one of the things they will tell me is that one of the rising surgeries for young teenage boys is a surgery called gynecomastia. Any medical guys in here, any MDs? Gynecomastia is breast removal for boys. There's something about their sedentary lifestyles, obesity, junk food, video games, and how it affect on the body, and maybe even prescription medications that change the bodies of boys altogether and turns them feminine. And I have a surgeon on my team who has actually removed what he says would be the perfect American female breast, but he's removed them from a 14-year-old boy who's traumatized by it. Gynecomastia. Now if that's not a symbol of what's happening in our age, I'm not sure what it is. But what's the solution? Wait for Superman? Wait for a video series? Wait for a government program? No. We are the police, even though that wisdom came from the lips of Barney Fife. I just got to say. That we're reaching. So the words I want to press into your brain today came from this man. This is what we think William Shakespeare looked like. We actually don't know. But William Shakespeare wrote a play based on a battle, an actual real battle that happened in world history. The battle was the Battle of Agincourt between Britain and France. That happened at Agincourt in the early 1400s. And William Shakespeare later wrote a play called Henry V. Maybe you've seen that. Here's the movie by Kenneth Branagh. Some of you may have seen this movie, and here's one line from it. Kenneth Branagh is one of my favorite actors. But from the play, in the play, there's a famous speech. It's called the Agincourt speech. And it's such a famous military speech that men gave it, commanders gave it on the beaches in Normandy on D-Day. Men gave it in Iraq and Afghanistan here recently. I know young officers out of West Point where I do a lot of lecturing. And they memorized this and gave it before their troops went into battle just recently in Iraq and Afghanistan. And the words that really come from that speech are the words that we've already said a bunch of times today because they are in the middle of that speech, and he says, "We few, we happy few, we band of brothers." And that phrase, band of brothers, just very briefly really describes what we're urging every man to be intentional about building. In earlier generations, men had bands of brothers automatically. Their family, their tribe, their village, the broader community of men that was part of their nation or their region. All of that happened kind of naturally. But men, for the most part, are living without a band of brothers. And what I want to urge you to with this today is the idea that we are going to have to, in our generation, be intentional about building a band of brothers in our lives. A band of brothers is not a therapy group, it's not an intervention society, it's not a study group. It's the group of men you do life with. It's the group of men you trust to help make you better, and you're helping them be better. It's a body of men who go through life with you. Let me just briefly describe what often goes wrong for us. Well, actually, I'll tell you what, I'll do that in just a minute. But I want you to understand why we're talking about band of brothers. We're taking that language from Shakespeare. We're taking it from the Agincourt speech. Those words resonated so much, they were actually in the original American national anthem before the words were, another anthem was chosen. But I want to talk to you about what a band of brothers is and how it functions. I want to get very practical with you in just a minute. But first of all, let me just show you this quote. One of my favorite secular philosophers and sociologists is a woman named Camille Paglia. And Camille Paglia writes a lot about men, and she says a lot of brilliant things, even though she's not only a woman, but she's also secular and maybe a little different politically from where I might be. But she says a woman simply is. But a man must become. What does she mean by that? Women, she thinks, and this is from a larger chapter, she says women, young girls, for example, just the changes in their bodies turn them into women. I mean, they naturally are going to come to certain transformations in their emotions and their thinking and the way they function by what happens just biologically in their bodies. Now, they still need some mentoring from women and some teaching about character and training and what have you. But for the most part, a woman becomes largely by the virtue of the biological changes. But she says masculinity is risky and elusive and is confirmed only by other men. You need other men to call manhood out of you. You need other men to correct you. You need other men to talk to you about what it means to be a noble or a great or an honorable man. And so I want to talk to you in the next few minutes about how to build a band of brothers and what it really means, and tell you a little bit of experience from my background. I want to challenge you to not walk alone. I want to challenge you to not let the normal American trajectory keep you from living the best life that you're made for and what God's ordained for you and what you're really made for. So let me talk to you about a few principles here that we need to get to, and our screen's a little narrow for my slides, so I'll just read them to you. The first thing we got to learn is the art of the indirect connection. A lot of men in here, some of you are introverts, some of you extroverts, you're shy, you're not really that outgoing. You wonder, how could I ever begin to build a band of brothers like Mansfield's talking about? Well, we've got to learn the fact that about the worst thing we can do is circle up a bunch of chairs with guys and say, Joe, how are you feeling today? What's your emotions? Joe, reach into your innermost and most embarrassing thing and let's talk about that, Joe. Now, let me just say something real quick because I want to talk about churches a little bit. I know a lot of you guys are church guys. I'm a former senior pastor of a church. I don't do that now. I work in other things, as you know. I'm television a lot, and a consulting firm in D.C., and I write and speak. But I live in two cities, Nashville and Washington, D.C. I'm a member of two different churches, so I'm definitely going to heaven. All right? No question. I'm a member of two churches. And so I am not anti-church. I'm not bitter about the church, but I am going to be blunt with you about the fact that church is not automatically the answer for some of the things that we're talking about, that you have to be intentional even at church. Because the fact is that we can be silly about some of these things and not really reach the needs of men. So I hope you're from churches. I hope you're thinking that way. I hope that you are that you're connected to a church. But I just don't want you to think that just because you're sitting in the pew that what I'm talking about today is automatically fixed. I'm a Christian. I'm a passionate Christian. I'm pro-church. But I also know that church can be a lonely place for a man, and I want us to try to fix that today. So what's the indirect connection? They do surveys with young boys and young girls, and they put the little girls in the room first, and the observers, the scholars, the technicians are sitting outside looking through two-way mirrors, and they watch the girls. The girls can play with toys, or they can move chairs. Inevitably, the little girls will turn the chairs facing each other and look at each other, and finally one of the girls go, I like your hair, you know, it sure is a cute dress, and that's it. They're off to the races, right? I mean, women are just different in this regard. Women can build a best friendship standing in the line at the grocery store, right? I mean, that's all it takes. We are looking at people like all people are criminals preparing for criminal activity. But girls, women, they can just jump in and just make it happen. The boys, when they put them in the room, the boys kind of scout each other out. You know, you guys know what it's like look at each other. And then the boys turn the chairs side by side so they're shoulder to shoulder. And the boys think up something to do. Bet I can beat you to that tree. Bet we can beat up Tommy. I bet we can set that door on fire. Come on, you know what I'm talking about. We've all done it. Boys are looking for bonding over something to do. Girls are looking for bonding and relating directly to each other. And so if you're going to connect with men, the first thing you've got to do is learn the art of the indirect connection. You don't want to get a bunch of guys circled up and say, let's talk about your feelings, Joe. I can think of all kinds of foul language most men would use at that moment. No, I'm talking about you got to have a pool party. You got to have a barbecue. You got to have a game party. You got to watch the Packers lose to the Redskins. You've got to, hey, I'm the chaplain for the Redskins. What do you expect me to say? Actually, I'm with you. I love the team, and I love how the community gets involved. But whatever, we'll talk about that some other time. Yeah, just wish your quarterback could throw a ball. All right. So anyway, so you got to, you know, and the young guys have drum circle or go hunting, go fishing, whatever it is you do. The way you build connections with other men is not just by engaging them correctly. Don't walk up to a stranger and say, hey, do you know about noble manhood? I mean, come on. You got to build some way for guys to connect indirectly. That's the art of it. And we don't tend to know how to do it. We're having a good time here. Why? Because there's food, right? Because there's hats. Because there's stuff, right? But you know, if Keith had gotten up here and said, turn to your neighbor. Look him meaningfully in the eyes. I'm out of here. There's a barbecue joint down the street, right? That's how that goes. So number one, learn the art of the indirect connection. The shyest guy in the room can have some guys over for a party, watch the game, burn some animals, do something, have some fun, do some fishing, throw a basketball, ride a motorcycle. I see a bunch of guys here in lime green jerseys. You guys all hiked or ran here?
No, we went on a Boy Scout bike trip.
You went on a bike trip, but you just came, right? Because every one of you who hugged me are sopping freaking wet. I just want to say, but that's cool. See, they're doing something, they're bonding, they're together, that's awesome. You understand what I'm saying, the indirect connection. Okay. Number two, and the words are wider than the screen, but it's extension of honor. What begins to change casual relationships among men. Most men are awash in a sea of casual relationships. Guys they barely know, guys they nod to at church, guys they know from their company, guys you see once a month in here or whatever. Most guys don't have guys they go deep with. What begins to change is when you look at someone and you see something that they're good at, something that you value, something you can honor about them, and you begin to ask them about it. Maybe you begin to enlist their help a little bit. Tony, you guys, I think you know Tony Zach from up in La Crosse, right? All these guys would know him. Well, Tony, man, I tell you, I work out every day, and I'm pretty decent shape, even though I'm a pretty big guy. Tony's up at 5:30 in the morning going to man camp. This dude is working out at 5:30 in the morning. You understand that at 5:30 in the morning, I'm on my second nap, right? I mean, that is not me. Tony can bench press about 4 times his body weight. He's crazy. He runs Ironman stuff. He's just nuts. And so although I was just with him for 3 days, I saw that he had this amazing gift for working out, this passion and the zeal. And I just said, man, teach me a little bit, coach me. I honored something in his life. And through that, we went to a deeper level of him helping me think things through and learn a little bit more and draw from his life. Find out what's noble, what's good, what's honorable in a guy's life, and honor it. Connect to it. Speak of it. Exalt it. Ask for him to speak of your life. I've got a band of brothers. I might as well tell you now, I've got a band of brothers. 2 of them are big NFL, former NFL linemen, Hall of Famers, great, big, huge guys, African American. We have the classic, and even he uses these words, the classic Asian accountant, literally little guy, bespectacled. He's an accountant, but he's tougher than all of us. And then we've got other guys. We've got an Arab guy who runs a restaurant. And then we've got another guy who says I'm the only normal guy in the room, and he's just a guy who just runs a hardware store. He's a great guy. All of them are great. But I got to tell you that these guys have changed me because I found things that were valuable in their lives. I saw them and I said, man, you got to coach me. You got to help me. You got to teach me. And they have helped me be a better man. They have helped me to accomplish things I never would have accomplished because they've confronted stuff in my life and they've taught me out of what they can do. So the extension of honor is number 2. You move your relationships to another level that's beneficial to everyone when you extend honor. When you honor, you cherish, you draw on the noble and virtuous things in another guy's life. I don't know what I can help Tony with. Maybe I can teach him Latin or something, but mainly the main point is that there's stuff we can learn from each other. Now, what really begins to change things in relationships between men, and this is so easy to do, is what we call the covenant transition. It's when 2 guys say to each other, I need your help to be better. I want us to make a deal that we're going to help each other. If I lived here, if I lived in La Crosse, I would say to Tony, Tony, you have not done your job in my life until you have dragged my big butt out of bed at 5:30 in the morning to go to man camp with you, and I lose 20 or 30 pounds, and I can bench press twice my weight. We have done, which would be, like a world record. But anyway, that you haven't done your job. And he said, well, I need such and so from you. I'm not going to tell you what it was. He said, I'd love to, if you were here, I'd love to be learning from you about such and such. And so we would make, if I was here, he and I would make a covenant transition. Our relationship, yeah, it would be about food. Yeah, it'd be about football. Yeah, it'd be about cheese curds. Yeah, it would be about other stuff. But it would also be about a covenant between each other that we're going to help each other be a better man in certain areas. Some guy's really good with his daughter and you're not. Some guy's really good with his son and you're not. Some guy's good at investing and you're not. Some guy's great at remodeling a house and you need some help. Some guy's great at workout and you're not. You don't have good grammar. You drop the F-bomb every 5th word or whatever it is, and he's pretty smooth and better at communicating. You need help. Whatever it is, just at whatever level, deep level, broader level, public level, fine. How can we help each other? How can we make a covenant transition? But guys, what you're heading towards is this. What you are heading towards, and what is at the heart of a band of brothers, is you are going for the free fire zone. Now, those of you guys who are ex-military, or maybe still military, you know what a free fire zone is in that context. A free fire zone in this context is that anything that needs to be said to make each other better gets said. We have a lot of rules in our society, and it depends on where you pretty much live geographically. If you're down south where my family's from, I didn't live down south very much because my father was military, but he was from deep south. And everybody down there is so polite. Well, I would never say anything to offend our friend. So nothing important ever gets said. Out west, we're all supposed to be the Marlboro man and rugged, so we never talk honestly to each other. We're all too tough to talk about personal things. Up north, we're supposed to be all, cold-hearted Yankee kind of thing, up in New England and so on. We don't care. We don't talk about personal stuff. I don't know what you deal with in this region, but there's some kind of a cultural thing from your heritage, from Europe, from backgrounds, from whatever the trades were out here and so on, whatever the professions were. There's something that works against you. It works positively in many ways, but it's also negative to some degree in that it keeps men separated. And so we don't ever pull down the walls. What I need is a bunch of men where I have a free fire zone. And by the way, one of the reasons that this has got to be a value if you're going to build a band of brothers is that we have an artificial version of it. This may be a little insulting to some of you. Hang in there with me. But what often passes for a men's gathering at kind of a personal level, a small group level, is a thing called an accountability group. Now, if you're a church or your organization uses that language, don't get upset with me, but here's why accountability group doesn't work for me. An accountability group is where I have to figure out what's wrong with me, hang on to that knowledge for 2 or 3 weeks, wait until we all meet at the restaurant, so over biscuits and gravy, that's Southern, over cheese, curds, and eggs, I don't know what you have for breakfast, but anyway, over stuff, all right, you're sitting at the restaurant, and you are, now I'm going to share what's bothering me, and you guys give me advice and pray for me. I got to tell you what, if that's the only thing I've got, I'm going to be in trouble. Because I'm not, us men will lie. I'm telling you, I'll just put our best foot forward. I'll tell you about my victories. I won't tell you about what's really going wrong with me. I need men who are walking closely enough in my life to know what's happening with me. I don't have any great big addictions or hidden things. There's nothing about me that's going to surprise you today. I'm just a normal guy. But I need men who are walking closely enough with me that they see that I'm looking at the backside of the waitress 3 or 4 times. Hey man, what's up with that? What's going on at home? Why aren't you fulfilled elsewhere? I need men who check on me. I need men who can hear the bitter phone call conversation with my wife, and they don't just let it go. They ask me what's going on. I need men who watch me for pride, or it's not that the whole point of a band of brothers is just to stand guard against evil. It's that you're encouraging other, you're helping each other, just like you would if you took a guy fishing and he was using the wrong stuff, or casting wrongly, or guy had the wrong weapon for the moose he was hunting, or whatever it was that you're about when you have fun. The same thing is true for what happens when you're one-on-one, man, when you're down in the nitty-gritty of each other's lives. I want guys to speak to me. My band of brothers knows that if they hear that Mansfield's doing a line, that's not a line of cocaine, that's a line of Oreos. Okay? That's why they come in rows, by the way. And for some reason, a couple of Oreos is not just all I need. I think 2 or 3 lines is a great idea. I think I can consume a bag in a couple of hours. You with me? I'm with you. Yeah, you. I'll intervene with you if you'll intervene with me when this thing is over, okay? So I literally, my guys will call me when I'm on the road. When I'm gone like a week like this, a couple of guys from my group are going to call me, just check on me. They're not worried about me, sleeping with the woman at the hotel desk. I mean, I'm not crazy. I don't have nutsy, just rock star kind of trash the room and, ruin the society. That's not me. I'm a Christian. I'm a righteous guy. But at the same time, they're checking with me. You doing okay? You didn't go flipping by the channels in the hotel room, and that HBO porn didn't grab at you. Come on, they're real. They know me. And then one of them will always say, "Did you buy?" He says it humorously. "Did you buy any Oreos?" Now he says it like I'm going to buy crack. You understand what I'm saying? But he knows. They'll just kind of go look, and they'll get funny about it because it's weird that I have this thing about Oreos. He said, was it the 6-inch long pack, or was it the big thing? Was it singles or double stuffs? Were they covered with? They're just having fun. But what they're doing in a humorous way is reminding me not to eat too much on these trips. You understand that? I want them to help me. And we have a lot of fun that way. And they're the first guys to keep me humble. Not too long ago, I was on C-SPAN. I was actually recorded giving a talk, and I was giving a little devotional for a gathering of some Congress people. The president was there, and some members of the Supreme Court. So it was a pretty cool thing. It was on C-SPAN. I was kind of excited about it. And so I gave this talk, and I read a scripture, and I gave a little devotional, which is what I've been asked to do as part of that service. When I got back to the hotel, I had to quickly change clothes, get to the airport, and And I put my phone on speaker and asked the guys who were all together for something else they were doing together, what'd you guys think? And what I heard was that sound that no man wants to hear. It's his friends muffling laughter. Just like, yeah, it was great. That kind of thing. And finally I just said, look, what is the deal with you guys? They said, and some of you may not quite catch what this means right off the bat, they said, there is no second James. Now what I had done was gotten in front of half of the U.S. government, and I had said I'd like to do a reading from 2 James. There's one book of James in the New Testament, not two. So I had basically cited a book that's not in the Bible in front of the president, half the Supreme Court, and a third of the Congress. And I want you to know that my nickname in that group is 2 James to this day. And they're partially doing to make sure that I see myself as small in my own eyes. But I want to have a free fire zone with them. They don't invite me to address certain things. I don't invite them to address certain things. We're already committed to each other that we want to be great men together, that we want to accomplish what we're made to accomplish, that we want to help each other. So there's none of this politeness. Now, we don't abuse each other, and what happens in the group stays in the group. We help. We're not about talking about it outside, but it's loving and it's tough. And I got to tell you, we have a lot of fun. We work out together, we go on trips, we hang together. And Bev, my wife, knows if anything ever happens with me, just something horrible somewhere, or if I start to flip out, these are the guys to call. They've been in my home, they know her, they know how we live, they know who we are, and they've helped me be a better man for her and for my kids. One of the big African-American linemen was in my home, and when he was leaving, he walked up to me and said, "You fool, you don't even know what your son's doing." And I said, "Well, thank you. And what are you talking about?" He said, "Look, just let me go talk to him. You mind if I take him to lunch?" I said, "No." So this guy went upstairs, went to my son's room, looked in and said, "You, me tomorrow, lunch." That's how this guy invites people to things. And so the next day he and my son went to lunch. Afterwards, this guy called me and he said, "If it's okay with you, I'm going to work with him on something. It's not chemical and it's not legal." And he said, "I'm going to work with him on this." He had gone in my home. He had spent some time with Jonathan. He had figured out, just because he had this own problem in his background, he figured out what was wrong, something I was completely oblivious to. He helped Jonathan fix it. They're close to this day. I, to this day, do not know what it was because I trust this guy so much. But he helped fix my home. I mean, it wasn't anything that was obvious, or I would have known. But he helped my son grow into a godly man. And that's what you want, a free fire zone where anything that needs to be said can be said to make you better. What you're trying to build is a contagious culture of righteous manhood. You're trying to build a contagious culture of noble manhood. You're trying to build something that is inspiring and encouraging. It sounds like we're being hard on each other. We're only hard when we need to be. But what we're doing is we're encouraging each other. We're building a culture. Other guys want to be involved. The sons want to come be involved because it's men loving each other and encouraging each other and holding each other accountable. And they know exactly how much weight I want to lose in the next 6 months. They know exactly how many times I'm working out. I know what their situation is. One of the NFL guys has made a huge amount of money and lost a lot of money. He's still got money, but now you can imagine our Asian accountant, who is just as tough as anybody in the room, but even though he's physically the smallest, he's holding them accountable, telling them how to invest, telling them to get on a budget, working with it. It's not that we dominate each other. This is not some kind of weird bondage society. This is just men helping men be better men. And I've worked with one of them who's very public and well known on his speaking, and now he's an ESPN guy. You understand what I'm saying. And by the way, I want to say that this is helping us spiritually, and it's helping us internally, but it's also helping us all professionally, because what's going wrong in your home is often going wrong in your profession, right? It's often going wrong in your work. And so if you've got a band of brothers who care about you and are a little bit different wiring than you, they can help you. I want you to ponder the words from this movie. There are some movies you will not go to heaven without, and if you haven't seen. And one of them is Seabiscuit. And here are a few words from Seabiscuit that I think kind of describe what it is we're trying to accomplish here.
Everybody thinks we found this broken down horse and fixed it. But we didn't. He fixed us. Every one of us. And I guess in a way, we kind of fixed each other too. Now,
I love those words, and I love them because the cause in this movie is the cause of Seabiscuit, this amazing horse in the 1930s. But the movie depicts the fact, which is historically accurate, that 3 or 4 men came together around that horse, and they all had deep flaws and pains and wounds in their lives. But through the process of being committed to this cause and helping each other, they fixed each other. That's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to be in each other's lives. We're trying to let no man walk alone. We're trying to have a band of brothers. We're trying to have men who know our lives and can help us be better men. It's not that we lose our privacy or our rights to our, to our own checkbook or our own calendar or our own bedroom or whatever. Nobody's trying to invade. We're trying to help each other be better. And let me just tell you, frankly, that this says your band of brothers, that I believe that this really can't be done unless we have one hand on God. I believe that God is the author of masculinity. I believe He's the author of manhood. I believe He knows who we ought to be. I believe that Jesus is the main archetype, the main symbol, the main model of what a true man, a good man, a noble man, a righteous man ought to be. And I think that we need the powers of God in our lives to become the man we're meant to be. I mean, some of the things that are happening in this society are difficult. I mean, one of the things I try to not to do is when I get in front of men to talk about, the 2 or 3 of the big sins we tend to commit, because you can always get men feeling bad about that. I want to talk about being a great man, so men try to aspire to something beyond just giving into the lesser drives. But porn's powerful in our society. Booze and food and entertainment's powerful in our society. You've got to have help. You've got to have the power of God. You have to have the grace of Jesus in your life. You've got to have the Holy Spirit working to help you be a better man. And then the Holy Spirit uses the men around you who are a band of brothers. And what I want for you is that you feel the pleasure of God as you're being a man. I don't want you to, when you think of manhood, to feel guilt and feel small and feel all Oreo dominated, or whatever, like I sometimes feel. And so another movie you won't go to heaven without is a movie called Chariots of Fire. And there's a scene in here where Eric Liddell, you all know who he was. He was a big Olympic athlete for England back in the early 1920s. And of course, Chariots of Fire, an amazing movie. But he says in here, when I run, I feel God's pleasure. And that's how I want you to live. So I want you to hear these words from this movie, which is an accurate depiction of what Eric Liddell actually said.
Jenny, you've got to understand. I believe that God made me for a purpose, for trying. But He also made me fast. And when I run, I feel His pleasure.
When I run, I feel His pleasure. Gentlemen, I believe that we should, in the pursuit of noble manliness, of what it means to be a good and noble and righteous man, to be modeled after Jesus, to be taking hold of all the things it means to be a man, all the responsibilities, all the powers, all the glories of what it means to be a man, we should be in partnership with God and feel His pleasure. It's not something apart from God. It's not something counter to Christianity. It's not something counter to who you are as men in the church. But it's something that we need to be encouraging in each other. So I'm urging you strongly to be intentional about building a band of brothers. Our society is sick for lack of meaningful connections of men. In the front of the book, let me see if I can snag one here real quick. Is there a copy of Building Your Band of Brothers over here? In the front of the book, there's a quote that you'll see. I guess you're all getting this free. Did I hear that correctly? I was talking about the Packers over there, so I missed a thing. But in the front of the book, there's a quote. It says, "Real friendships among men are so rare that when they occur, they're famous." It's almost true. It's almost true, isn't it? That we sometimes, you're watching ESPN or you're watching a news show, you're watching 60 Minutes, and they're like, "Hey, these 2 guys are actually friends," And sometimes I watch that and I go, "Well, what's the big deal about that?" But the fact is that is how our society thinks, because most men are walking alone. Most men don't have other men in their lives. Most men don't have anyone with whom they share a free fire zone. I don't want you to walk alone, but more than that, it's not just that I want you to have a fishing buddy, although I do. I also want you to have men who can help you be better men. I'm very proud of what Leading with Power is doing. I'm very proud of Keith and Tony and all the guys who are involved, and this is a great way to drill down. What's got to happen out of here is that fires get lit in this room, because once a month is not enough. You know that. You can't live that. You can't live just on that, as awesome as this is. So take it to the next level. Be intentional. Build a band of brothers. Begin to be intentional about having this thing that we describe. And hopefully this little booklet is going to help you. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of what you're doing. I'm proud of the men you want to be. And it's an honor to be with you. God bless.